So before introducing her, I'll ask her to switch on her video so that we can see you now.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And she is, now I believe everyone can see, she is Gayani De Alwis. She is the Global VILAT Chairperson. VILAT as in Women in Logistics and Transport, which is the Sri Lanka's forum, Women's Forum of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transportation. And she's also the immediate past chairperson of CILT Sri Lanka. She's a non-executive independent director for Singer Sri Lanka PLC, and also Logicare Private Limited, and the founding chairperson and advisor for VILAT Sri Lanka. Good evening to you, Gayani. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Good evening, Rukshani. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Awesome. So we'll quickly start off with the webinar. So I would like to first understand about the supply chain. As everyone knows, there's a current economic crisis, which we hear every day in and out. And we also hear that supply chain is a crucial part in getting over with this crisis as well. So how can you first tell us about it? And I would like to know, as a layman, how would be supply chain defined as?
Okay, I think that's a very good entry point to today's webinar. I know most of you in your MBAs must have learned a bit, but I think, sorry if I had to repeat some of the things that you already know, but I thought it's good to just to give an intro on what supply chain is all about and then talk about this current situation. So, I mean, as I always mention, behind every product, service, or an event, there is a supply chain. We may not notice it actually, right? So, I mean, from the time you wake up in the morning until you go to bed, whatever you consume, whatever you experience, there is a supply chain without our knowledge, which supports us to, ensure that our needs and wants are met, right? So it is important to understand when supply chain is not, or there is a breakdown in the supply chain only, we know the value of the supply chain. I mean, that's the situation that we are in. I mean, we saw during COVID when we were all confined to our homes, we couldn't go out. So we were relying on somebody bringing stuff to our doorstep, right? I mean, that is when we realized how difficult this whole chain called supply chain, right? So everybody started talking about supply chain, not only locally, even the small local vendor, fish vendor, even the postman, everybody, even banks had to deliver stuff to the doorstep, the money, through Pick Me and all of that, So globally, I mean, if you really look at the US president in his first 100-year plan, supply chain was top of his mind. His primary, one of the key things was to get the supply chain in order. And also this really, because what happened was during COVID, the entire, not only the local economy, entire supply chain globally and locally got disrupted. So everybody started, it became the talk of the town, right? Everybody was trying to understand what is the so-called supply chain, right? So now we have, I hope everybody knows, because literally every day we see in news, in the papers, they're talking about Sapayum Dame, all the single word of supply chain, logistics, all of that people started talking about, right? So what supply chain does is from the starting point, that is the supplier end, till the customer receives something, all activities that happen from the point of origin to the point of consumption, in a little bit of technical terms. So there is a huge chain, it's a long chain, huge amount of things happen within this chain. And also if you look at in an organizational context, right, what marketing does is to understand the insights, consumer insights, and understand the needs and wants, and then they expect the organization to deliver that promise. How do we deliver that promise? Is through supply chain, because we have to fulfill the demand that is there in the marketplace. So in a kind of an MBA language, if I talk about, this is what we do in supply chain is fulfilling the customer demand, right? So that is in an organizational context. So I spoke about the layman's term, then organizational context, and then if you look at a country's context, in a country's context, because this is kind of the backbone of an economy, right? I mean, we all know the economic crisis that we are in now, because the supply chain has come to a grinding halt for simple day-to-day requirements like the fuel, the food that we eat, you know, the gas. No, everything is in short supply. Again, in supply chain, we call it, if you fail to plan, plan to fail. So we have not planned it properly. So if you look at in an organizational context, what are the functions that deliver this supply chain or power the supply chain is planning, because we need to understand the demand in the marketplace, which is done by the demand planning function. So once you know the demand, we need to supply the demand. So to do that, we need to plan the supply. So we call it supply planning. We have to identify the raw materials, packing materials, services that are required. And also we need to make sure that whether we have production capacity in the factories, if you're manufacturing the goods, or if you're trading, you're bringing something from another country, then you have to have a warehousing facility to store the traded goods. And once you are producing, if you're in a manufacturing environment, then you need to make sure you have labor available. Whether you're going to use your permanent cadre labor or a contract labor. If you don't have capacity, can we use outsourced operations to do that? Then we need to look at how am I going to make my produce get to the hands of the consumers. Then we need the warehousing and transportation. That is where the distribution. So inbound logistics, that is where the raw materials are brought into the factory. Outbound logistics, where from the factory, it reaches the consumer. So this in a simple way, this is what supply chain is all about. So I hope you got an idea when from the point of origin to the consumption, when if one part is not operating in the right way, in a smooth manner, the whole supply chain will come to a standstill. That's exactly what has happened for our petrol, the diesel, the gas, the food, everything. Because we don't have funds, because we haven't managed our fund supply chain. We have so much waste in our entire economy. There is corruption, lots of things. I mean, this is not the time to waste talking about that. We all know that. So if you don't manage your supply chain, your country's economy will come to a grinding halt, which we are experiencing that. So we are not going to talk about doom and gloom. We are here to solve problems as supply chain professionals and MBA holders. We can get this country out of the woods if you really understand how to manage our supply chain.
I think the the best thing we say is that if you fail to plan, yes, obviously you have to plan to fail. You have a plan to fail. I think that's what we are actually seeing now, experiencing now as well. And that from that, I thought I'll ask you about this. A couple of months ago, the most heard word or the buzzword was actually, let's go for homegrown products. Let's stop a little bit of imports so that we can save our dollars now, because we need to make sure that homegrown is the way to go ahead. So and then there came this import substitution, and then the import restrictions came in, but it adversely affected our supply chain as well, isn't it? And so what can you tell on that, Gayani? What is your take on that? Can we seriously rely on being with import substitution and only homegrown stuff?
Yes, that's a good point, because unfortunately, Sri Lanka is a very service-oriented economy, right? I mean, that is how we have structured our economy. So every little thing we have to be dependent from the outside world. So because of this backdrop, we haven't developed our local, where we even have the competitive advantage, we haven't really developed our local manufacturing industry. I'm not saying we can be like China or Bangladesh or Vietnam and all of these countries where they are competitive advantage, especially in the higher labor intensive industries. We don't have that kind of a labor advantage, and also the volumes that we are talking about. Our USP in our countries, in certain industries, we've already seen in the apparel industry, how we have really identified our niche. We really identified we are in the higher order, products, high performance, products, because that is where, because we are good at designing, we have a top of the pyramid in the apparel product portfolio, we are in there. So we can compete in that. So certain industries, we have really set up our local, manufacturing base, but there again, we don't have properly backwardly integrated supply chains. So we don't have, still we are dependent on the raw materials, and we don't have a base there. So we haven't really thought about our manufacturing strategy in the country. Therefore, when something happens to the external world, and especially like a pandemic situation that we were experiencing during COVID since 2020, all the vulnerabilities that we had in our system came to light, came to the surface. And that's the situation we are in. So then what happened was, we failed to plan, therefore we plan to fail, right? Because of that, government had to really look at various measures without really looking at long-term, situation of the country, because we had to quickly take action because the house is burning. We need to do something about it, right? So some of the actions we took was not really helping our cause, to manage our economy in a very stronger way. So we were anyway had a huge debt burden, we had a budget deficit. So all of that, and with dwindling foreign exchange resources, the reserves that we had in the country, there was no option but to stop the imports. So that was the immediate reaction, because that is one way. When we don't get foreign remittances to the country, we were not getting foreign inputs, were not happening, output were, much higher, because therefore we were not in a position to continue the way we were doing. Having said that, we have this misunderstanding always. We import everything for the local consumption. It is not the case. 80% of what we import is as inputs for our manufacturing industry. For some of it is for capital goods, some of it is for raw material inputs, all of that. So we need to really understand whether we can truly look at a local import, what they call the import substituted economy, without having the necessary infrastructure in place. Having said that, globally, we know countries are now moving into inshoring, nearshoring, because now you realize the food security and various other challenges, the geopolitics, the wars fought around the world, has necessitated countries to rethink the way that they manage their supply chains and their economies. Because you need to be ensuring food security, you need to ensure the social security, you need to ensure the defense, all of that, right? So that's why in the 100-day plan in America, now we have a huge problem with the chip shortages in the in the automobile industry and the defense equipment industry. So America now has started setting up their manufacturing facility for chip production there, which was earlier being done in China, Taiwan, with components from different parts of the world. So because unfortunately our economy is very, very small, and we don't have the necessary infrastructure, and we have the resources in place, but it's just that we have not invested in the right infrastructure and backwardly integrate our supply chains to cater to the manufacturing industry's needs. So I would say, in selective manner, yes, import substitution is the way to go, but you can't totally rely on that alone. You need to selectively identify and prioritize the industries that are bringing in foreign exchange to this country, and support those export-oriented countries, because we are totally dependent on import-driven economy. We need to now look at export-oriented economy. So to do that, we need to really carefully look at how we are going to manage the economy by identifying and prioritizing the way we operate our economy. Yeah.
Thank you, Gayani, on that. Now, you were saying that we need to focus on becoming an export-oriented country, yeah? And this has been, I think we have been talking about this for a very, very long time. Just like we were saying that Sri Lanka is in a very strategic location and we have all the benefits, but how much have we reaped out of it? What have we done? And how had the supply chain interconnection, and why also interconnection to the international supply chain during this time? How has that been, helping Sri Lanka as well? And we have been talking about these things over the government changes, over the head changers, everything. But however, we're still thinking, all right, we still have to focus on being export oriented. What are we going to do, Gayani?
Yes. I think Sri Lanka is blessed with the strategic positioning. Actually, we are located in the busiest east-west maritime route. We have the biggest, the population. We are having access to one of the biggest populations in this entire world, 1 billion plus population. That is India, right? And also through this, we have access to Bay of Bengal, then we have to the Middle East and also in the Indian Ocean. So we are that way strategically located. And we've been talking about it for so many years. But one good thing is every time the government changes, from time I could remember, each government that come into power, always one thing that they all agree is to make Sri Lanka a maritime or logistics hub. At least there is one point where they all agree. So that is
at least there's one. That's a good point. That's a positive point.
But the only thing is, whenever somebody focuses on that and try to do something, the next government, when they come into power, they cancel the contract or whatever. So that's what has happened to us. So if you really look at Port of Colombo is the only port in the entire South Asia which is having a deep draft port. So the big ships, which is 20,000 TEUs, right, can be managed in our ports in Port of Colombo. So because we have CICT terminal there, actually Sri Lankan Port of Colombo is that way is very unique. We have multi-terminals and each and every terminal has its unique capability. We have South Asia Gateway Terminal, which was set up as part of a public-private partnership 20 plus years ago. That was one of the very successful public-private partnerships that we can talk about. The other one is the Sri Lanka Telecom, right? So this has been very successfully operating, and then later on CICT came in, and they are the biggest, the terminal that has the deep draft port in the entire Southeast Asia region, and also we have our very own Jaya Container Terminal, which has been there. So all three containers put together, we actually manage about 7.2 million TEUs last figure, right? So, and also unfortunately now we are about 4 or 5 years behind schedule in terms of capacity enhancement in the port. Nevertheless, better late than never. Last year we signed with, despite all the union action and all of that, we signed with Adani Group the West Container Terminal, and also Sri Lanka Ports Authority is now developing the East Container Terminal. I actually had the privilege of visiting the West Container Terminal 2 days back. It's very exciting to see the plans that they have in place. So they are going to be fully automated port there, everything, and there will be, everything kind of hardly any manual operation there, right? So they will look at automated gantry cranes, RMGs, all of that will be fully automated. Inter-terminal transfer will be efficient, and they will have a control center. And they are also planning to get more women. It's really interesting to, they are, one of the intentions is to get more women in the port, and it's going to be a green port. So a lot of the new development that are coming into play is looking at the new trends that are being evolving in the supply chain arena. So if you really look at, we have private terminals working in harmony with the Sri Lankan government managed terminal JCT. So as a whole, we have a Port of Colombo, which is working very well. And this we can really be proud of. And at the same time, we also know, I don't know whether most of you know this statistic, about 70 to 75,000 ships pass through this in and around the Colombo, Sri Lanka, 10-12 nautical miles away from Port of Colombo and Hambantota. So, I mean, out of that, that means 600 odd ships pass daily. Out of that, only 12 to 15 only call in our ports. Just see the opportunity that we have. If you look at the heat map of the shipping route, it's so thick and it's so crowded. Now, just imagine if we have the right infrastructure and able to quickly manage and we operate operating environment, because already we are the top 15 port. CICT was recently ranked as the top 15 port in terms of productivity in the entire world. And also within the top 22 ports in the entire world. And also we are the best in South Asia. So already we have the credential in terms of the ranking, right? It's just that we need to have get our act together. And another statistic I would want to mention to you is also in logistics, whether the country is logistics friendly, there is a rating called Logistics Performance Index. This is done by World Bank. It's called Connect to Compete. In that ranking, Sri Lanka is 94. The last ranking was done in 2018. During COVID, they didn't do that. In 2018, Sri Lanka was ranked 94 out of 160. Unfortunately, over the years, we are coming down despite the improvement that we have done. So if you look at that, because just imagine anybody who would like to come to Sri Lanka or call in here would want to see how friendly, logistics friendly we are. Because those LPI ranking look at 6 parameters. They will look at efficiency of the clearance process, how quickly you clear the process, the border control agencies, there are many agencies, including customs, the speed and efficiency, then the timeliness of the shipments, tracking and tracing, quality of the logistics services that we have, the related trade and transport related infrastructures. There are 6 parameters they look at. And despite us being the only port which is having the deep draft facility and the best being in South Asia, unfortunately, our ranking is 94 and rest of the countries in South Asia are ahead of us, right? So I just can't believe, of course, this is a perception-based ranking, but perception also form, somebody's, opinion about it. It can be reality in the mind of somebody. So we need to really do things in order to develop confidence about the country, and especially with the May 9th incident that happened, with the strike that happened, union action, there were some, issues, especially in the eyes of the international media, and therefore misinformation is being spread also. So recently, the entire port community, the SLPA, together with the rest of the stakeholders, got together and issued a press release and a conference and all of that, but the damage is done already. So we need to make sure that we send the right signals to the external world. If you want to be competitive, nobody would like to come to Sri Lanka if we are not efficiently managing things, if there's disruption, because supply chains have to be smoothly run. I mean, you cannot incur additional costs. So we already have a lot of issues on our plate. So we need to make sure how best are we going to make our supply chain smooth and efficient, given the current positioning available, plus the the efficiencies that we are already, when you compare with the other ports in the region, we have a lot to learn and lot to implement. And of course, with the 2 new terminals coming up with digitalization, we are going to already blockchain platform is being adopted in SAGT, and port community system, initially ADB funded grant has been used for the Rotterdam terminal to really do initial feasibility studies, and national single window, the trade information portal is already done. So certain things are being done, but with the 2 new terminals, looking at automation, digitalization, and various improvement to the system, I hope the situation should improve. And also we will have, I think, Adani Port terminal, they're going to be, the first phase would be ready by 2024 last quarter. And the second phase, the entire terminal will be fully operational by 2026 mid. So I'm sure we will have about 10 million TEUs in the next few years. So that's, but we have to be mindful of the competition that's going to be around us. And we are very lucky because we have the world's biggest economy. I mean, China is going to overtake almost USA by 2024. So they are managing our Hambantota port. India is going to be part of the port of Colombo. We shouldn't be worried about it. If we play our cards well, we can be friends with everyone so that we can get the best out of it, rather than looking at what kind of motives they have, the geopolitics. Yes, of course, they are big sharks and we are small sprats in this ocean, but if we play our cards well, like how Singapore is managing, right? So we can be a force to reckon with and be competitive.
Definitely a very good example how Singapore was and how they are now being a logistical hub in the South Asian region. And just like you mentioned, Gayani, on a very positive note, the Port of Colombo has been ranked as the most efficient port in South Asia and the Indian subcontinent, and third in the Indian Ocean Rim, and 22nd among 370 ports globally. And you mentioned that we need to do some other things because we need to increase the LPI. I mean, we need to go above our ranking in 94 in the LPI. Yeah. So what sort of, now this achievement in being the most efficient port, how can we use this to build our brand image now? What sort of things can we do now as a country?
Yes, I mean, first of all, again, the perception matter. So ranking will be secondary, but whatever the action, through our action, we can really, make a difference, and especially in the eyes of the external world. So as professionals in the industry, we have a huge role to play. So already in the Port of Colombo, with all the different private terminals, a lot of good work is happening. As I mentioned to you, there are a lot of digitalization efforts that are happening, and green port concept, sustainability has become a big, important agenda with the climate emergencies that we are experiencing in the world. So, I mean, all these things, we should be able to market it. So Port of Colombo, with these kind of new initiatives that we are going to implement, we need to really communicate all these new offerings that we are going to give. And at the same time, we must minimize the disruption. A lot of industrial action is happening. So, and also the productivity. I mean, I don't know, I read somewhere, we have 30,000 port employees, but we only need 3,000 or something like that, right? I mean, I need to validate that. Somebody mentioned that in the media, right? So I'm just saying, if that is the case, the politicians must make sure they should not come and park these people every time they come into power. So that's another thing, because we already know 1.3 million government sector employees we have, that is excluding the military and the other, some of the corporations and all of that. So if you really look at to our economy, it's a huge burden. So we need to be having a productive workforce. So we need to send the right message, because quality of service is one of the important things in the logistics performance index. So if you want to create a good brand image, we have to really walk the talk. We cannot do one thing and others' outcome cannot be different. So rankings show that we are doing well, moving in the right direction. But of course, we also have negative publicity because of our own action, because it's our own doing. So we have a huge role to play to show, because we talk about our literacy rate, high literacy rate, when you compare with the rest of the world. But unfortunately, especially unfortunately because of the COVID and all of that, other disruptions, we are unable to, show the real true colors of Port of Colombo. But I'm saying, but despite the challenges that we have as a country, mindset, I think your mindset is very important, because there's a lot of doom and gloom, negativity in social media, a lot of, keyboard warriors, sitting armchair critics and all of that. Yes, let's not get carried away with all of that. There's always 90% of what you can do. There's 10% only what is beyond your circle of influence. So what is important is, let's not get carried away with the negativity. Yes, of course, we need to highlight when things are not happening. But at the same time, let's not go only on that route. Let's focus on what you can contribute to the country to, improve the image in your own specialized spheres. As MBAs, we have a huge role to play, because in our own little space, if we all think in the positive way, and, then collectively as a nation, there will be synergistic benefit, because the true reflection of the Sri Lankan spirit will be then seen. So that's very important, because I'm a very positive thinker. So I always, yes, while we highlight things that are not happening right, but at the same time, this is the time for us to really come out of it strongly. So when there are obstacles in life, you will try to look at things to be done in a different way. I mean, I used to hear, I was very small at that time. My parents used to say, and also my former company at that time, say during the early 1970s, My Unilever colleagues those days used to tell us when there was restrictions, import restrictions, they looked at new ways to even develop perfumes locally, because you can't import things, you develop things using local materials. So this is the time to really unleash your creativity, the innovative ability, really look at out of the box thinking, so that the Sri Lankan ingenuity can be really, portrayed and shown to the rest of the world. Because we are a resilient nation. We've gone through many challenges in our life, the war, the tsunami, many things that we have gone through. And this is one such thing. But let's not really get bogged down. And then, of course, our brand image can be lifted through only our actions. Of course, politicians are there, but we only appoint them. But let's make the right decision to appoint the right people and make sure that we do our part as well. Because it's just the holistic contribution of the entire population that will take us to whatever the level that we want to really take us. Yeah.
Great. I think that's the most important part, our mindset. Rather than, bogging down and looking at all the negativeness around us, just see how to improve, how to be creative, regardless of whether you're like really educated. Even if you don't have MBA, if you're not, even if you don't have a degree, but you still can be creative. That's a different story, because it's about improving your processes, the procedures, and what you do in your individual, your family, as an individual, as an organization, as an industry. And we also see this improving mindset is very important, right? So Gayani, how do you see the younger generation with this mindset? How creative they have become? How can we use this younger generation into getting this industry going the extra mile?
Yes. I mean, already there is good news. I mean, you see a lot of young people getting into these new areas. I mean, there are a lot of startups that are getting created. I think this new generation is quite bold. I mean, this is the time the true and entrepreneurial spirit in you will come out. I mean, there are a lot of support. There is a lot of support from various startups, various agencies, various chambers. That are there, they're supporting this. I think what is important for us is you need to develop critical thinking and problem solving mindset, because this is something that we have to really develop ourselves, because you can't be totally dependent on what is coming out of your country, and we cannot be looking at that import dependence, of course. Yeah. So it is, I don't know, again, another statistic where our entire fruit export is equivalent to the amount of apple we import into the country. Just imagine. I'm not saying you shouldn't eat apple, but I'm just saying sometimes we don't know how to prioritize our life.
Exactly.
I mean, okay, they say apple a day keeps a doctor away, but there are so many Sri Lankan fruits and vegetables. I don't think anybody else have this kind of a wide variety that we have in the country. And we should not import it as it is. Can't we get into value added, the various products and special indigenous fruits that we have in the country, vegetables? I mean, there are vertical agriculture, lots of things that young people are getting into using technology. So therefore, I think the new generation is all set for looking at the future in a very different way than our generation, right? So I think it is important for us to really look at how we can do things differently, especially in a very stressed economic situation that we have in the country. We need to look at new ways of doing things. If you critically think, if you go into the real indigenous things that we have around us, and we need to package it like a high quality offering to the export market. You cannot just package a commodity and try to send, you won't get anything out of it, because you can't compete in the global international markets. So you need to really provide support. So I work with Women's Chamber and various other chambers and all of that, where especially with women entrepreneurs, what we have identified is, they have problems with access to finance, access to markets, access to know-how, information. So, I mean, there are various agencies who should give this kind of support. There are lots of, agencies who can provide that information. In the comfort of your home, you can get into this. There are lots of local IT providers who have develop various offerings so that in the comfort of your home, without going into various government agencies to get your approval, register your businesses and all of that. So I think you need to start small, think big, and move fast. That's what you need to do, because there are so much opportunity in this country. We having natural resources, world-class graphene, the tea, agriculture sector. If you look at the minerals that we have in that, all of that, there are people already working in these spaces, right? And we have so much, of course, we are talking about a food security issue that is going to evolve in the, global issue, but Sri Lanka have, have our own real issue that we already have created for ourselves. So therefore, if we reduce our post-harvest losses, 30 to 40% of what we harvest is getting lost. Now we can have apps developed to, track, give guidance to them, use technology. The problem is what is harvested after harvesting only we try to see how to store. We have to start doing it before it is harvested.
Planning comes first always, isn't it?
Again, you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So there are little things that we can look at. There are so many problems around us. If you just put your mind to it, critically think about it, go to the root cause, that's all. So many problems are there. So young people, I'm sure, will get energized to solve these problems. Already some people are doing that. So my only advice is, please, problems are all over us. It's just that your passion and the action orientation. That's what.
Take one at a go, and then think about it and get it solved. Yeah. Exactly. Of course, we can't handle everything, and I don't think anyone is capable of. But yeah. So we have a question from a viewer actually. This is Pasandu Madshan asking, even if we had plenty of opportunities in this strategic location, the issue is there are lack of proper plan or unchangeable world, attracting set of policies to grab those opportunities. This is actually leading to my next question. That's why I'm telling you about this as well. So he's asking, is it good to start supply chain management related startup in Sri Lanka?
Of course, because see, supply chain is like a relay, no? So everybody must hand over the baton to the next person without getting the baton dropped. If you do a smooth handover, from each lap to the other, finally the last lap runner will win the race. So that's like that. So now, since he started talking about the port, strategic location, okay, let's see, we are the most efficient port in the whole of South Asia, because we can quickly, unload and release the ship and all of that. But after the containers are unloaded, how much time it takes for the inter-terminal transfers. Okay, how much time it will take for the container to come out of the port gate, because everything is manual. Everything is with people. If there's a strike, the whole thing will come to a standstill. So as I mentioned to you, already Sri Lanka Ports Authority, along with the other terminal operators, have looked at digitalization initiatives. So in time to come, in the next 2 to 3 years, the entire port gates will be automated. Inter-terminal trucking, the infrastructure that they will have is the more lanes will come, ITT movements will come down drastically. So with all of that, using technology, you are not dependent on people all the time. People will be there to manage the control centers, but the presence of people, army of people are not required. Doesn't mean that people will be, fired, but they will be put to use for productive things. So then you improve your competitiveness. So therefore, I'm just talking about the port alone. And if you look at organizations, there is so much waste that you have. We call business waste. Do you have to wait until the next activity happens? Is there unnecessary movement happening? Toyota production system talks about 8 ways. So, in everything, there is a meaning for everything. If you don't manage those ways, your supply chain costs will go up. So obviously, if you work on minimizing the supply chain costs, you will be more competitive in the marketplace. You can get more profits. So obviously, if you engage in supply chain related projects, obviously, because supply chains are present everywhere, it's omnipresent, right? I always say, if there's no supply chain, there will not be life on this planet. Because just imagine if supply chains stopped. We don't have food. We don't have, anything. If there's a power, cut, we don't have power. The hospitals will come to a standstill. So, therefore, just imagine the fuel. Now there are Facebook groups, and recently the ICTA and the petroleum ministry have got together and developed an app after so many months. But even that, of course, it'll take some time to come, get the fuel information management system to come alive. But I'm saying these simple things, we don't have visibility. Supply chains need visibility, transparency for it to operate. Then the corruption will go away, efficiencies will improve, consumers will get confidence that, okay, I know when the shipment is coming, I know when my stuff is coming, I know when I should go. Now in hospitals, when you online make an appointment, you get to your phone, the doctor has come, then only you go. You don't need to unnecessarily go and wait there. So similarly, I know a lot of young kids have started apps, optimizing supply chain, improving supply chain. Many things can be done. Sky is the limit. It's just that you must put your mind to it. So yes, you should from today get into the industry, because it's such a happening place. I'm not saying because I'm a supply chain professional. I mean, if you really want action, this is the place to be, right?
That's a good one, Gayani. Yeah.
I hope others will get offended, but it's such a happening place.
So this is just a tricky question which came out of what you were talking about. Yes, I understand that technology will improve everything. And you said before that we have an excess of employees in all of these organizations. What is going to happen? That will be the first question, isn't it? Won't they say, okay, we are going to lose our jobs? What are you talking about? We're going to stop working. We're going to go on picketing because we'll bring in technology. Yes, I am very much happy about it, being tech savvy and all of that. Yes, but what will happen to the people, the employees there? Are we going to pay them money and keep them, or what are we going to do?
So there are two ways. You have to be open with your employees in the organization if you're going on a digitalization or automation in your organization. And if you think you can upskill those employees that you already have, you need to start working on it. And if you feel that employees are not willing to take up that additional responsibility or acquire new skills, then you need to have a conversation. You need to look at voluntary separation schemes and all of that. No point in arguing and just sitting and wasting your time. The country is not getting anything out of it. You're personally not getting out of it. Your confidence level and also your happiness, I don't think just lying there and doing something and all of that will happen. So therefore, my personal advice is, yes, of course, there is this perception that when you digitalize, automate, you will lose jobs. Initially, there will be this perception, but the future ready skills have to be acquired. World is moving at a rapid pace. We all call we live in a VUCA world. It's highly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. If we don't change, we will be like dinosaurs. World is moving at a rapid pace, and we are talking about Singapore being a highly developed country, but they tried to learn from us many years ago. But unfortunately, we are still there, stagnant, and they have moved much ahead of us, competing with the top economies in the world. So it's for our own survival of the quickest and the fittest. Normally, you call it survival of the fittest, but I always call it survival of the quickest. Because if you, in the future, it's not there is a saying also, it's not the big fish who will not eat the small fish. It's the fast fish who will eat the slow fish. So we cannot be going on a slow trade. We have to be quick because world is changing at such a rapid pace. If you don't change, we will be like dinosaurs. We will be extinct. Do you want to be extinct or do you want to move with the pace? I think that's my answer. You should not be worried. If you're willing to move in the new way of working, you have opportunities everywhere. Because when the economies grow, if people change their mindset, people acquire new skills, we'll have more opportunities. But if you think, I don't think I can do this, and you will be going down further down, then obviously you will not be competitive and country will not be competitive. We'll go down the drain. So we want to be in a country who's flourishing, have more opportunities, and that is where we should really move forward.
Right. Yeah. So I have another 2 more questions. I'm thinking whether the time is enough, but still I want to talk to you about it. So one is actually what needs to be corrected from the regulatory point of view and have a more efficient and effective supply chain. You told about it in this conversation from the start, but if you could just give me a couple of pointers where we can then we can focus on.
Yes, I think one important thing is we need to have a proper plan, and there should be policy consistency. You can't keep changing your policies just because the government changed. We need to have a strategy, policy which is going to take us to the next 20, 30 years. And whichever the government comes into power, yes, they might initiative that you do to achieve that strategy would be different, but we should have agreement among the political parties and say, this is what we're going to do to take the country forward, no matter, of course, it's going to be very tough, no matter what my party policies are. So, I mean, whatever level, maybe we are not 100%, will not be able to achieve it, but at least some level of agreement we should have. Because especially at least in the main infrastructure, if you want to be like, okay, forget about anything, look at Sri Lanka as strategic location. If we all have agreement, if we all had agreement about the strategic position, although it is there in the manifesto in all successive governments, every time a new government comes, they come and cancel the previous government's signed contract. So if we got this WCT or ECT, we are 5 years behind schedule. Now we would have had a fully operational port now, because everything has a lead time. So that is one, policy consistency and cohesive strategy, irrespective of whichever the government. So from the government side, they have to walk the talk. Secondly, we need to give visibility and transparency, online digitalization, because we still have a very archaic customs ordinance, the port, some other things. Despite you have everything online, then you have to also get reams of papers photocopied, and still you have to do that. Luckily during COVID, delivery order was online, automated. So we should not go back. And 150-year-old tea auction went online, coconut auction went online. So that good things happen when things are going tough. So we need to continue in this digitalization journey so that we can reduce corruption, human-to-human interaction can be minimized. So that is something. And even in corruption, you have a giver and a taker. So you should not only blame the government agencies or the politicians. We as industry, we also have to really make sure that we do the right thing. And it's tough, but if you really start from schools, the value system, from early stages of your life, you need to inculcate the right thing. It's going to be tough, but at least if you reduce 20% of it in the country, then this wastage, elimination, the debt burden, all of that can be gone, and we should be able to do that. So, I mean, from a supply chain point of view, all of these things, if you do that, obviously you will be in a position to create the right perception about it in terms of logistics performance index, ease of doing business, innovation index, whatever, because your system will be very transparent and efficient, so that we will be able to, in the eyes of the international rating agencies, we will be able to manage our country and seen as a very progressive country. Yeah. Hello.
Hi, I'm back, of course.
Yes.
My second plan was to move on to my mobile phone if my power goes out. Yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Great. So you have a proper business continuity plan. That's another one. So one other thing is we live in a highly VUCA world. So country has to have a business continuity plan A, plan B, and also nowadays we need to really look at plan C as well, because so many different things can happen. I mean, we started off with COVID, then we had the Ukraine war, then, China, US relationship, all this is going to impact us as well. So therefore, geopolitics, global wars, all these issues, China again imposing lockdown in Shanghai, all of these are going to impact us. So we need to have a business continuity plan. Our supply chains has to be resilient. So just in case, it's not just in time now, we had to look at just in case. We had to have inventory stocks
Just in
available.
case.
Just in case stocks have to be there. And we need to relook at our entire supply chain network and look at, because we have to have a continuous supply if we want to have a reduce our inflationary issues that we have in the country. When there's a shortage, hoarding will happen. So all interrelated. So we need to see what is it that we need to do and improve the competitiveness in the country, right?
Ma'am, I think Rukshani got disconnected due to the power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. Since our questions been answered, we can wind up the sessions for now.
Thank you.
So on behalf of JMAA, let me formally thank you, ma'am. I think these are the topics that we need to raise out, because most of the time there are most common issues has been always addressed, but nobody look at the big picture, country as a whole. So these are the things that we really need to look at, and we should educate our public on. These are the areas that we need to strongly critically evaluate and maybe optimize to make everything more productive rather than the processes that we have. So thank you very much, ma'am. I think we can't name anyone else in this country to speak a topic like this than you. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen who are viewing online. So we have close to around 100 to 150 online viewers for the webinar. I would like to thank you all of you for joining at this time. So we'll be back with another wonderful webinar in future topics on current crisis and how to overcome these issues in a more productive and holistic way rather than speaking on specific problems. So thank you once again, ma'am. So we'll bind up the session for today. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much. Thanks for organizing this topical webinar. Thank you. All the best. Okay, bye.
All right.